Hello everyone, I'm reading from Autobiography of a Yogi. I'm starting very near the bottom of page 452. Many quaint stories of Sadasiva, a lovable and fully illumined master, are still current among South Indian villagers. Immersed one day in Sadami on a bank of the Kavi River, Sadasiva was seen to be carried away by a sudden flood. Weeks later, he was found buried deep beneath a mound of earth near Kadhumundi in Coimbatore district. As the villagers' shovels struck his body, the saint rose and walked briskly away. Sadasiva became a Muni, non-speaking saint, after his guru had rebuked him for worsting in dialectical argument an elderly Vedanta scholar. "When will you, a youth, learn to hold your tongue?" the guru had remarked. "With your blessings, even from this moment." Sadasiva's guru was Swami Sri Paramasivdra Saraswati, author of Dharavatya Parakasika and a profound commentary on Uttara Gita. Certain worldly men, affronted because of the God-intoxicated Sadasiva, was often to be seen dancing without decorum on the streets, carried their complaints to his learned guru. "Sir," they declared, "Sadasiva is no better than a madman." But Paramasivendra smiled joyfully. "Oh," he exclaimed, "if only others had such madness." Sadasiva's life was marked by many strange and beautiful manifestations of the intervening hand. Much seeming injustice there is in this world, but God's devotees can testify to countless instances of his immediate righteousness. One night Sadasiva in Sadami halted near the granary of a rich householder. Three servants, on the lookout for thieves, raised their sticks to strike the saint. Lo, their arms were immobilized, like statues, their arms aloft. The trio stood in unique tableau until the departure of Sadasiva at dawn. On another occasion, the great master was roughly pressed into service by a passing foreman whose laborers were carrying fuel. The silent saint humbly bore the burden up to the required destination and there placed his load on top of a huge pile. The heap of fuel at once burst into flames. Sadasiva, like Trail Langa Swami, bore no clothes. One morning, the nude yogi absentmindedly entered the tent of a Muslim chieftain. Two ladies screamed in alarm. The warrior dealt a savage sword thrust at Sadasiva, whose arm was severed. The master departed unconcernedly. Overcome by awe and remorse, the Muslim picked up the arm from the floor and followed Sadasiva. The yogi quietly inserted his arm into the bleeding stump. When the chieftain humbly asked for some spiritual instruction, Sadasiva wrote with his finger in the sands, "Do not do what you want, and then you may do what you like." The Muslim was uplifted to a purified state of mind and understood the paradoxical advice to be guided to soul freedom through mastery of the ego. So great was the spiritual impact of those words that the warrior became a worthy disciple. His former haunts knew him no more. The village children once expressed a desire in Sadasiva's presence to go to the Madura religious festival, 150 miles away. The yogi indicated to the little ones that they should touch his body. Lo, instantly the whole group was transported to Madura. The children wandered happily among the thousands of pilgrims. In a few hours, the yogi brought his small charges home by his simple mode of transportation. The astonished parents listened to avid tales about the procession of images in Madura and noticed that the children were carrying bags of Madura sweets. An incredulous youth derided the saint and the story on the occasion of the next religious festival held in Sri Rangam. The boy approached Sadasiva. "Master," he said scornfully, "why don't you take me to the festival in Sri Srangam, even as you took the other children to Madura?" Sadasiva complied. The boy immediately found himself among the distant city throng. But alas, where was the saint when the youth wanted to leave? The weary boy reached his home by the prosaic method of foot locomotion. Before leaving South India, Mr. Wright and I made a pilgrimage to the holy hill of Arunachala near Tiruvannamalai to meet Sri Ramana Maharishi. At his ashram, the sage welcomed us affectionately and pointed to a nearby stack of East-West magazines. During the hours that we spent with him and his disciples, he was mostly silent, his gentle face radiating divine love and wisdom. To help suffering humanity regain its forgotten state of perfection, Sri Rama teaches that one should constantly ask himself, "Who am I?" The great inquiry indeed. By stern rejection of all thoughts, the devotee soon finds himself going deeper and deeper into the true self, and the sidetracking bewilderments of other thoughts cease to arise. The illumined Rishi of South India has written, "Dualities and trinities on something do hang. Supportless they never appear. That support search for, they loosen and fall. There is the truth. Who sees that never wavers." This is a photograph of Swami Yukteswar and Paramahansa Yogananda in religious procession, Calcutta, 1935. Chapter 42, Last Days with My Guru. Guruji, I am glad to find you alone this morning. I had just arrived in Sriramapur Hermitage carrying a fragrant burden of fruit and roses. Sri Yukteswar glanced at me meekly. "What is your question?" Master looked about the room as though seeking escape. "Guruji, I came to you as a high school youth. Now I am a grown man, even with a gray hair or two. Though you have showered me with silent affection from the first hours to this, do you realize that once only in all the day and on the day of meeting that you have ever said, 'I love you'?" I looked at him pleadingly. Master lowered his gaze. "Yogananda, must I bring out into the cold realms of speech the warm sentiments best guided by the wordless heart? Guruji, I know you love me, but my mortal ears ache to hear you say so." "Be it as you wish. During my married life, I often yearned for a son to train in the yogic path, but when you came into my life, I was content. In you I have found my son." Two clear teardrops stood in Sri Yukteswar's eyes. "Yogananda, I love you always." "Your answer is my passport to heaven." I felt a weight lift from my heart, dissolved forever at his words. I knew he was unemotional and self-contained, yet often I had wondered at his silence. Sometimes I feared I had been unsuccessful in fully satisfying him. His was a strange nature, never utterly to be known, a nature deep and still, unfathomable to the outer world, whose values he had long transcended. A few days later I spoke before a huge audience at Albert Hall in Calcutta. Sri Yukteswar consented to sit on the platform with the Maharaja of Santosh and the Mayor of Calcutta. Master made no remarks to me, but I glanced at him from time to time during my address and thought he looked pleased. Then came a talk before the alumni of Sirapur College. As I gazed on my old classmates and as they gazed on their own mad monk, tears of joy showed unashamedly. My silver-tongued professor of philosophy, Dr. Ghoshal came forward to greet me, all our past misunderstandings dissolved by the alchemist's time. A winter solstice festival was celebrated at the end of December in the Saramapur Hermitage. As always, Sri Yukteswar's disciples gathered from far and near. Devotional Sankirtan solos in the nectar-sweet voice of Christo Da, a feast served by young disciples. Master's profoundly moving discourse under the stars in the thronged courtyard of the ashram. Memories, memories. Joyous festivals of years long past. Tonight, however, there was to be a new feature. Yogananda, please address the assemblage in English. Master's eyes were twinkling as he made this doubly unusual request. Was he thinking of the shipboard predicament that had preceded my first lecture in English? I told the story to my audience of brother disciples, ending with a fervent tribute to our Guru. His unfailing guidance was with me not only on the ocean steamer, I concluded, but daily throughout my 15 years in the vast and hospitable land of America. After the guest had departed, Sri Yukteswar called me to the same bedroom where, once only, after a similar festival, I had been permitted to sleep in his bed. Tonight my Guru was sitting there quietly, a semicircle of disciples at his feet. Yogananda, are you leaving now for Calcutta? Please return here tomorrow. I have certain things to tell you. The next afternoon, here is a photograph. The last solstice festival celebrated by Swami Sri Yukteswar, December 1935. Paramahansa Yogananda is seated next to Sri Yukteswar Center at the table in the courtyard of the ashram at Saramapur. In this hermitage, Yoganandaji received much of his training under his great guru. The next afternoon, with a few simple words of blessing, Sri Yukteswar bestowed on me the further monastic title of Paramahansa. It is now formally supersede your formal title of Swami, he said as I knelt before him. With a silent chuckle, I thought of the struggles to be undergone by my Western students after the pronunciation of Paramahansaji. My task on earth is now finished. You must carry on. Master spoke quietly, his eyes calm and gentle. My heart was palpitating in fear. Please send someone to take charge of our ashram in Puri, Sri Yukteswar went on. I leave everything in your hands. You will be able successfully to sail the boat of your life and that of the organization to the divine shores. In tears, I was embracing his feet. He rose and blessed me lovingly. The following day, I summoned from Ranchi a devotee, Swami Sibananda, and sent him to Puri to assume the hermitage duties. Later, my Guru discussed with me the legal details of settling his estate. He was anxious to prevent the possibility of litigation by relatives after his death for possession of his 2 hermitages and the other properties which he wished to be deeded over solely for charitable purposes. Arrangements were recently made for Master to visit Kidarpur, but he failed to go. Amulaya Babu, a brother disciple, made this remark to me one afternoon. I felt a cold wave of premonition. To my pressing inquiries, Sri Yukteswar only replied, I shall go to Kidarpur no more. For a moment, Master trembled like a frightened child. Attachment to bodily residence, springing up of its own nature, is present in slight degree even in great saints, Pantajali wrote. In some of my Guru's discourses on death, he had been wont to add, just as a long-caged bird hesitates to leave its accustomed home when the door is opened, in parentheses. Guruji, I entreated him with a sob, don't say that. Never utter those words to me. Sri Yukteswar's face relaxed in a peaceful smile. Though nearing his 81st birthday, he looked well and strong. Basking day by day in the sunshine of my Guru's love, unspoken but keenly felt, I banished from my conscious mind the various hints that he had given of his approaching passing. Sir, the Kumbh Mela is convening this month at Allahabad. I pointed out to Master the Mela dates in a Bengali almanac. Do you really want to go? Not scenting Sir Yukteswar's reluctance to have me leave him, I went on. Once you beheld the blessed sight of Babaji at an Allahabad Kumbh. Perhaps this time I shall be fortunate enough to see him. I do not think you will meet him there. My Guru then fell into silence, not wishing to obstruct my plans. When I set out for Allahabad the following day with a small group, Master blessed me quietly with his usual in his usual manner. Apparently I was remaining oblivious to implication in Sir Yukteswar's attitude, because the Lord wished to spare me the experience of being forced helplessly to witness my Guru's passing. It has always happened in my life that at the death of those dearly beloved to me, God has compassionately arranged that I be distant from the scene. Our party reached the Kumbh Mela on January 23, 1936. The surging crowd of nearly 2 million persons was an impressive sight, even an overwhelming one. The peculiar genius of the Indian people is the reverence innate in even the lowliest peasant for the worth of the spirit, and for the monks and sadhus who have forsaken worldly ties to seek a diviner anchorage. Impostors and hypocrites there are indeed, but India respects all for the sake of the few who illumine the land with supernal blessings. Westerners who were viewing the vast spectacle had a unique opportunity to feel the pulse of the nation, the spiritual ardor to which India owes her quenchless vitality under the blows of time. The first day was spent by our group in sheer staring. Thousands of pilgrims bathed in the holy Ganges for remission of sins. Brahmahan priests performed solemn rituals of worship. The devotional offerings were strewn at the feet of silent jnani. Lines of elephants, caparisoned horses, and slow-paced Rajpunana camels filed by, followed by a quaint religious parade of naked sadhus who waved gold and silver scepters or streamers of silken velvet. Anchorites wearing only loincloths sat quietly in little groups, their bodies besmeared with ashes, which protect them from heat and cold. The spiritual eye was vividly represented on their foreheads by a single spot of sandalwood paste. Shaven-headed swamis appeared by the thousand, ochre-robed and carrying their bamboo staff and begging bowl. Their faces beamed with renunciant's peace as they walked about or held philosophical discussions with disciples. Here and there under the trees around huge piles of burning logs were picturesque sadhus, their hair braided and massed in coils on top of their heads. Some wore beards several feet in length, curled and tied in a knot. They meditated quietly or extended their hands in blessing to the passing throng. Beggars, maharajas on elephants, women in multicolored saris, their bangles and anklets tinkling, fakirs with thin arms held grotesquely aloft, brahmacharasis carrying meditation elbow props, humble sages whose solemnity hid an inner bliss. High above the din we heard the ceaseless summons of the temple bells. On our second Mela day, my companions and I entered various ashrams and temporary huts, offering pranams or saintly personages. We received the blessing of the leader of the Giri branch of the Swami order, a thin, ascetical monk with eyes of smiling fire. Our party then visited a hermitage whose guru had observed for the past 9 years the vows of silence and a strict fruitarian diet. On ideas in the ashram hall sat a blind sadhu, Parajna Shaksu, profoundly learned in the Shastras and highly revered by all sects. After I had given a brief discourse in Hindi on Vedanta, our group left the peaceful hermitage to greet a nearby Swami, Krishnananda, a handsome monk with rosy cheeks and impressive shoulders. Reclining near him was a tame lioness, succumbing to the monk's spiritual charm, not, I am sure, to his powerful physique. The jungle animal refuses all meat in favor of rice and milk. The Swami has taught the tawny-haired beast to utter Om in a deep, attractive growl. A cat devotee. We rode our next encounter, an interview with a learned young sadhu, is well described in Mr. Wright's sparkling travel diary. We rode in the ford across the very low Ganges on a creaking pontoon bridge, crawling snake-like through the crowds and over narrow twisting lanes, passing the site on the river bank which Yoganandaji pointed out to me as the meeting place of Babaji and Sri Yukteswarji. Alighting from the car a short time later, we walked some distance through the thickening smoke of the sadhu's fires and over the slippery sands to reach a cluster of tiny, very modest mud-straw huts. We halted in front of one of these insignificant temporary dwellings with a pygmy doorless entrance, the shelter of Karma Patri, a young wandering sadhu noted for his exceptional intelligence. There he sat cross-legged on a pile of straw, his only covering, and incidentally his only possession, an ochre cloth draped over his shoulders. Truly a divine face smiled at us after we had crawled on all fours into the hut and pranamed at the feet of this enlightened soul, while the kerosene lantern at the entrance flickered weird dancing shadows on the thatched walls. His face, especially his eyes and perfect teeth, beamed and glistened. Although I was puzzled by the Hindi, his expressions were very revealing. He was full of enthusiasm, love, spiritual glory. No one could be mistaken as to his greatness. Imagine the happy life of one unattached to the material world, free of the clothing problem, free of food craving, never begging, never touching cooked food except on alternate days, never carrying a begging bowl, free of all money entanglements, never handling money, never storing things away, always trusting in God, free of transportation worries, never riding in vehicles but always walking on the banks of the sacred rivers, not remaining in one place longer than a week in order to avoid any growth of attachment. Such a modest soul, unusually learned in the Vedas and possessing an M.A. degree and the title of Shastri (Master of Scriptures) from Banaras University. A sublime feeling pervaded me as I sat at his feet. It all seemed to be an answer to my desire to see the ancient India, for he is a true representative of this land of spiritual giants. I questioned Kara Patri about his wandering life. Don't you have any extra clothes for winter? No, this is enough. Do you carry any books? No, I teach from memory those people who wish to hear me. What else do you do? I roam by the Ganges. At these quiet words I was overpowered by a yearning for the simplicity of his life. I remembered America and all the responsibilities that lay on my shoulders. No, Yogananda, I thought sadly for a moment, in this life roaming by the Ganges is not for you. After the sadhu had told me a few of his spiritual realizations, I shot an abrupt question. After the sadhu had told me a few of his spiritual realizations, I shot an abrupt question. Are you giving those descriptions from spiritual lore or from inner experience? Half from book learning, he answered with straightforward smile, and half from experience. We sat happily a while in meditative silence. After we had left his sacred presence, I said to Mr. Wright, "He is a king sitting on a throne of golden straw." We had our dinner that night on the Mila grounds under the stars, eating from leaf plates pinned together with sticks. Dishwashings in India are reduced to a minimum. 2 more days of fascinating Kumbhaha, then northwest along the Yuma banks to Agra. Once again I gazed upon the Taj Mahal. In memory, Jitendra stood by my side, awed by the dream in marble. Then on to the Vrindavan ashram of Swami Keshanbananda. My object in seeking out Keshabananda was connected with this book. I had never forgotten Sri Yukteswar's request that I write the life of Lahari Messiah. During my stay in India, I was taking every opportunity to contact direct disciples and relatives of the Yoga Avatar. Recording their conversations in voluminous notes, I verified facts and dates and collected photographs, old letters, and documents. My Lahari Messiah portfolio began to swell. I realized with dismay that ahead of me lay arduous labors in authorship. I prayed that I might be equal to my role as biography of the colossal guru. Several of his disciples feared that in a written account their master might be belittled or misinterpreted. One can hardly do justice in cold words to the life of a divine incarnation, Panchanand Bhattacharya had once remarked to me. Other close disciples were similarly satisfied to keep the Yoga Avatar hidden in their hearts as the deathless preceptor. Nevertheless, mindful of Lahari Messiah's prediction about his biography, I spared no effort to secure and substantiate the facts of his outward life. Swami Keshanbananda greeted our party warmly at Vrindavan in his Katyayani Peeth ashram, an imposing brick building with massive black pillars set in a beautiful garden. He ushered us at once into a sitting room adorned with an enlargement of Sri Yukteswar's picture. The Swami was approaching the age of 90, but his muscular body radiated strength and health. With long hair and snow-white beard, eyes twinkling with joy, he was a veritable patriarchal embodiment. I informed him that I wanted to mention his name in my book on Indian masters. "Please tell me about your earlier life," I smiled entreatingly. Great yogis are often uncommunicative. Keshanbananda made a gesture of humility. "There is little of external moment. Practically my whole life has been spent in the Himalayan solitudes, traveling on foot from one quiet cave to another. For a while I maintained a small ashram outside Hardwar, surrounded on all sides by a grove of tall trees. It was a peaceful spot, little visited by travelers owing to the ubiquity of cobras." Keshabananda chuckled. "Later, a Ganges flood washed away the hermitage and cobras alike. My disciples then helped me to build this Vrindavan ashram." Here's a photograph. It's Swami Keshanbananda's ashram. Swami Keshanbananda, a 90-year-old disciple of Lahari Messiah, Yoganandaji, his secretary C.R. Wright, at Krishnanamanda's ashram, Vrindavan, 1936. One of our party asked the Swami how he protected himself against the Himalayan tigers. Krishnanaman shook his head. "In those high spiritual altitudes," he said, Wild beasts seldom molest the yogis. Once in the jungle I encountered a tiger face to face. At my sudden ejaculation the animal was transfixed as though turned to stone. Again the Swami chuckled at his memories. Okay, that's it for today. That's the end of the first paragraph on page 468. Goodbye.